Welcome to Behind the Badge. This podcast aims to improve the health and well-being of frontline workers. Each episode features candid conversations with former and current frontline community members and subject matter experts. Join us as we explore the unique nature of serving in high-risk roles, sharing inspiring stories of resilience, strategies, and resources. We are not qualified health professionals, nor are we aligned with any organization. The opinions expressed in the podcast are solely our own. Additionally, the content may evoke strong emotional responses for some. Listener discretion is advised.
G'day everyone, welcome back. In this episode, Jason and I are joined by a guest who has gone from military service to elite sports science, high-risk industries, and exploring how humans perform under pressure. A former Irish infantryman turned researcher and consultant, he has spent his career helping teams and individuals across mining, emergency services, combat sports and aviation sectors to manage fatigue, improve safety, and optimise sleep. He's also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, an ultramarathon runner, and someone who walks the talk when it comes to performance and resilience. In this episode, we unpack sleep for shift workers and first responders, why night shifts are more than just tiring, how fatigue mirrors intoxication, and what you can actually do to perform better on and off the job. We also talk about the myth of the 8-hour rule and what really matters for sleep, why consistency beats quantity, strategic napping, and caffeine do's and don'ts. Whether you're on the front lines or backing up the team behind the scenes, this episode is full of practical insights to help you operate at your best. Without further ado, it's our absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Ian Dunican.
Welcome, Dr. Ian Dunican. How are you?
Thank you. Very good. Still alive, which is a good start to the day. So yeah, everything's good.
It's always nice.
It's a critical enabler, I call it. Yeah.
Mate, as we sort of touched on in your intro, you've done a fair bit between your studies and your active lifestyle that you lead. Just for a bit of context for people listening, can we sort of start towards the start of your timeline, and can you run us through your earlier years?
So I was born on a dark winter's night. No, I like probably most teenagers, I started getting a part-time job when I was about 12, but I went into full-time employment when I was 18. I joined the Irish military in an infantry unit. I spent about 5 years there. So an active infantry unit for people who are ex-military. You know, I was in what's called support company, heavy weapons and reconnaissance. Did a stint over in the Middle East on a UN mission to Lebanon. The Irish Army is a bit different. We do a lot of it, civil power. So did some stuff there. Then worked in the health and fitness industry for about a year and a half. Met my wife, who's Australian, came to Western Australia via Africa after doing some backpacking. Decided we'd stay here for like 3 or 4 days. Been here for 22 years. Went back to uni part-time in the evenings whilst I was working in mining. So spent 10 years working for a mining company in health and safety, business improvement roles. Did a Bachelor of Education in Training and Development, did a Master's in Business, a Master's in Mine Engineering, and a Graduate Certificate in Sleep Science. And then after about 17 years of total working time, I thought, well, it's now or never to do a PhD. I went back to the PhD in sleep and performance with elite combat and contact athletes because I played rugby growing up, had a keen interest. I also do martial arts. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, got a background in long distance running, and the last 7 or 8 years been doing long distance swimming in the ocean. And I finished the PhD and then started a business in 2018. Melius Consulting. We also have another website called Sleep for Performance that has a podcast and blogs and lots of information on there. And really what we do is we work with a lot of safety critical industries, mining, oil and gas, rail, transportation. And we've even done some stuff with paramedics and and fire and rescue services as well, aviation, to name a few. We also then work with some elite athletes in things like UFC, Super Rugby, things like this. And we do research as well. So we're kind of like pracademics. We do the practical and the consulting side. Most of our people have what's called adjunct positions as well in universities. So constantly trying to bring that research into the practical world and do that stuff. Yeah. And then outside that, like I said, main things is long distance swimming and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the moment. I mean, getting into free diving the last year or so. So yeah, I like to keep nice and busy.
So when do you get time to sleep?
Well, everybody asks that question, and I think it's always interesting because for a lot of people, sleep is really first and foremost a mathematical issue. And so we often come across people going, I do all these things and I go to bed at 12 and I get up at 4 and I want to get 8 hours of sleep. Well, if you're only allowing 4, 8 into 4 doesn't go. You know, I'm not that intelligent, and even I know that. So a lot of people have a mathematical issue. And so I think, Jason, what it is, it's compromise and it's balance. Like a lot of things in life, you know, I get more joy out of doing those things than going out drinking or doing lots of other stuff. So I don't drink. That actually freed up a lot of time for me. Health-wise, mental health-wise, energy-wise. You know, I try to eat pretty clean, keep my body weight in good check as well, so I can do all those things that I really enjoy. And I'm pretty disciplined around my sleep schedule. And consistently, I'd say on a long-term average over a month, a short-term average, even long-term average, I am getting between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But like everybody else, I have trouble as well. You know, there's some nights where it's hard, it's hot, you're tired, you're whatever it might be. So yeah, it's never perfect.
Because the people that we speak to, and you know, sleep is always the number one contributing factor to mental health. That, you know, that we talk about, and 8 hours seems to be that rule of thumb goal that everyone wants to try and achieve. And you know, I'm now one of these Garmin watch wearers, and I probably stress more about not getting the 8 hours and low scores, and it's probably causing me not to sleep well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good jumping off point to talk about some of this stuff, because this actually kind of somewhat annoys me. We have like everything in life, there's lots of marketing and there's lots of bullshit out there, and we seem to get kind of wrapped into these things and then get stressed out about them. What you're describing is actually a condition called orthosomnia, which is like an obsession about the device. You wake up in the morning, you're looking at the device, and you're like, oh, I didn't get enough sleep, you know, everything's going to be bad today. And so myself and another guy called Matt Driller from La Trobe and a few other people on a paper wrote about this when we were talking about the kind of pros and cons of sleep tracking in athletes. And the challenge here is that people wake up in the morning, they look at this device and they view it as if it's gospel, right?
Yep.
These are physical activity trackers. They're not medical devices. They get around FDA and TGA approval because they're just there to be indicative of how you sort of move and sleep and so on. So you got to take them with a bit of grain of salt.
Yeah.
They are measured against what's called polysomnography. You might have seen this with someone all wired up with all these kind of EEG electrodes on them and all over their body. And they generally perform, in general, about 80 to 90% accurate against those in terms of the time you go to sleep, the amount of sleep you get, the time you get up. But the sleep stages on them, like REM sleep and stage 1, 2, and 3, are extremely wobbly, I would call them. They can be out by up to 300% for some of these devices. Wow. So I'd urge people not to even look at the sleep stages, because there's nothing you can do about those anyway. You can't go to bed at nighttime and push a button on the side of your head to get you makes you get more or less REM. So we can't even do that. But in terms of sleep habits and behaviors, yes. However, on top of that, I don't even recommend people looking at it in the morning. Look at it on a 2 to 3 week window. A lot of these devices allow you to look at the average sleep in 7 days or a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Look at it on this average of like at least 3 weeks. And if you're into 7 to 9 hours in that zone, great. The next thing I would say to people is that it's not just about the amount of sleep you're getting, it's the consistency. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the research coming out, is that the consistency and the quality and the timing is just as important as the duration. So in other words, Jason, I'd rather you got 7 hours of sleep every night, but you were more consistent with your sleep habits and behaviors. You went to bed at 10 and got up at 5 every morning. I'd rather that happen as opposed to you getting 8 hours, but you're going to bed at midnight, getting up at 6, and then a nap in the day, and you're all over the place. Because we know, with all that lack of routine and discipline around your sleep, that's what really starts throwing us out of sync. And then people are in this kind of tailspin trying to make up.
During that conversation, mate, you mentioned a few terms, being REM sleep, Can you explain the differences with those stages of sleep?
So generally, it gets broken into two broad groups, REM and non-REM, right? So it's really easy.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you old enough to remember, REM was a band in the 90s, but it also means rapid eye movement. People often say this is deep sleep. That is not true. It's a term that's used, but it's not correct. Deep sleep is actually one of the non-REM stages. So we've got REM sleep, which is where we do about 80% of our dreaming. Predominantly, this happens in the back end of our sleep period if we're sleeping at night. This is where you'll have, obviously what it says, rapid eye movement, but your body won't be able to move, because if you do, that would be called having REM behavior disorder. This is where we see, basically lots of memories being consolidated across all stages of sleep, but lots here as well. Then we have non-REM sleep. This is really important for physical repair and recovery. This is where we have deep sleep. So we've got stages 1, 2, and 3. As we go down, it gets deeper. 3 is the deepest. This is where we have what we call slow wave sleep. And so this occurs as well. And so all of these stages are very important across the night. We cannot manipulate those stages. They naturally occur. There is no evidence about any sort of food or nutrition or diet that actually implements those, that affects those, despite what you read. And any changes that you may have seen in those being reported in popular media are very negligible impacts on them. And also, we don't actually understand what may be happening. It might be just pure chance. A lot of those studies are self-reported in terms of how they impact them. So they're the stages of sleep, and you will oscillate in and out of those stages across the night. And it is quite normal to wake up between 3 and 5 times a night. And that cumulative time awake, up to 40 minutes, 40, is completely normal as well. Because we see people panicking, I woke up twice last night, I was awake for 20 minutes. That is actually completely normal. And you may find when you sleep in different environments, you go away for work, you're in a hotel, you're having a nap at work and so on, you might have more of those awakenings as well, because it's an unfamiliar environment. Or in fire and rescue, police, military, people on call, we see more fragmentation because they're constantly being sort of nearly hyper alert for that, buzzer or bell to ring or that, thing to go off. So we can see some issues around this as well.
So I've also heard, say, someone, let's use a nurse, for example, that's working the graveyard shift from, midnight till 8 or 10. Yeah. Obviously, fatigue, sleep deprivation, which is bad enough in itself. I've also heard that with let's use the fireys or the police. Well, let's use the fireys because we do get to bed down at night. Being woken up during those stages is probably more detrimental than the nurse that's doing the 12 till 10.
I've not heard that before.
Okay, interesting.
So I haven't seen any science behind that before. That might be a bit of bro science or, rumor mill amongst people. I think the fireys, you're a bit of a protected species. You get to sleep. So compared to the paramedics, you have it easy. That's what we always say. But what you're saying is right in terms of what you may have what's called sleep inertia, right? So when you wake up, actually, I'll take a step back because to understand this effect, you have to kind of unpack a little bit of circadian rhythms first. So could I just explain that for a minute and that might help this? Yeah. So a circadian rhythm, people may have heard of it. Circa meaning about, day meaning the day. This is like a natural rhythm that the body occurs on about 24.1 hours a day. And so everybody's circadian rhythm is going to be slightly different. You got people who get up early and go to bed early, people who go to bed late and get up late. So this will kind of shift left and right. But in general, let's take someone who's in the middle. You're going to have a couple of things happening across a day. There's probably 3 key things. One is a circadian dip in a day after lunch. This little dip in performance, you feel a bit tired, a bit sluggish, a bit sleepy. It's not related to a lunch or the food you have. This is why certain cultures have a siesta, like in Spain. The next thing is you'll have what's called a wake maintenance zone or the forbidden zone. This is roughly between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. This is the hardest time to sleep in a 24-hour period. So for people who are working a midnight shift, so midnight to 8 a.m., for example, it's very difficult for these people to sleep during this time. And many nurses or people on 8-hour rotating shifts, police and so on, will experience this. It's very difficult unless there's a high amount of what we call sleep pressure. But even then, it's very difficult. We think this may be a hang-up from the days when we got hunted by, I don't know, saber-toothed tigers and cats and dogs and whatever, back when Freddie Flintstone was around. So we still have this kind of hang-up when the sun goes down. Then when we go into the evening, we see past midnight, it gets difficult for us. We go into a big circadian nadir dip between roughly 3 and 6 or 3 and 7 o'clock in the morning, low body temperature, very difficult to concentrate, very difficult to keep awake. This happens to every human. There is no way to overcome this. It is not possible. This is just normally what happens. So when people say to you, you just get used to it, you do this, you eat this food, you jump up and down, you know, you flick yourself in the head, you open the window, you put on the radio, all these things don't work. They're just distractions, really. For the nurse or the person that's working through that, they're going to have an increase in sleep pressure or sleep debt then occurring. So it's going to be harder for them to sleep during the day. What may be happening for people in fireys or sparkies or anybody that's on call, if they wake up, they're going to have sleep inertia. And there will be risk when you wake up from sleep inertia, which affects everybody differently based upon a number of different factors. Sleep you got in the last 24, 48, and 72 hours, potentially the amount of alcohol you could have consumed, your own individual fitness, the stage you wake up in sleep, and so on. And obviously you can't control that. If an alarm goes off in a fire station, you got to react. If you're a sparky and you get called out, there's like a fire or something, you go, or SES or whatever it might be. But what we do know is that some of the alerting strategies when you get woken up during that time is, one, is quick bouts of exercise. So high intensity movement really quickly is good. The use of caffeine, either caffeine gum or caffeine drinks, are really good as well. And caffeines and obviously cola, energy drinks, and so on. The challenge might be is that when you come back from a job, trying to relax again and sleep again, maybe near on impossible for that. And depending on the job as well, the type of job that it is. Because I think, you know, I did volunteer firefighting living in the Pilbara nearly 20 years ago, and you would go to a job and it's like a false alarm and you come back, and even that's hard enough to wind down. But then you go to a house fire and you find out maybe there's a kid potentially inside or something else happens. Now your whole stress level, and by the time you get home at 6 in the morning, trying to wind down is virtually impossible. So I don't think it's better or worse than the other one. It's just a different type of stimulus that's happening. However, I would say that there might be more merit in the fact that you can get some sleep at those periods. So it would be more favorable than somebody working right through, I would say. Right. So if I had to pick between one and another, I would say maybe being a firefighter where you have the ability to nap, or in certain cases, whatever the job may be, where you are able to get some sleep, it is going to help. However, that may cause issues the next day, trying to sleep during the day, because you've reduced that sleep pressure. And now you get into this kind of what we call polyphasic sleep, multiple sleep periods before you come back. So it can be difficult in terms of like a routine.
Yeah.
That'll be the challenge. And I'm sure you've all experienced this already.
Well, yeah, your first night shift, you know, if you have a busy night, that second night shift, you are arriving pretty well fatigued and way behind the 8 ball with sleep.
Is there any advice on that, Ian? So in that, say that specific example that Jace has just said, you have a pretty rubbish first night. So, you know, most of the fire departments in Australia run that 10-14 roster in that they do 2 14-hour night shifts. And now they also have the ability to back it up and do overtime the following nights as well. So you could look at potentially be doing 3, 4, even 5 nights. If you have a particularly rough night or minimal sleep or disturbed sleep, I realise that, you know, this might be an individual thing, but is there any general advice on like what you should do that day? Is it napping? Is it trying to sleep for long periods of time, or is it pushing through?
Right. There's a lot of stuff in that. So I'm going to break this. I'm going to step back a few steps. I'm going to break this down because you've given a really good example there, Josh, of what goes on in a lot of places. And so let's look at this in 2 parts. There's what we call organizational design and organizational factors, and an individual responsibility. Organizational design and organizational factors is what the business develops for you. I will say on the record, because I don't care, I've said this before, I think how those shifts and roster design with fireys is absolutely ridiculous. A 14-hour night shift is ridiculous. You're just asking for trouble. If there was anything, I would do a 14-hour day shift and a 10-hour night shift. Right? The more you can stack the deck in terms of optimizing circadian biology, day shift stuff, the better it's going to be for people. People are more alert during daylight hours, and the more you can reduce overnights, the better it's going to be. Okay? So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing that I would say on top of that is that from a design perspective, overtime on a night shift, I would say would not be recommended in general. Now, we can use what's called biomathematical modeling tools to look at that, but we generally wouldn't recommend it. And if we were going to recommend it, we'd probably look at it on the first part of the night shift. So in other words, if you were doing 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., If there was overtime required, we'd say come in at 4 p.m., not staying on till like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, right? So this is challenging because, play stupid games, you win silly prizes, and that's what happens. And so a lot of times when we work with companies, we look at the organizational factors first, because if you create a bad sort of condition or bad rules or bad environment, the people are just, they're just behind right from the start. Now, I understand that there's lucrative elements here as well, because when we talk about fatigue management, it's not just about sleep and it's not just about health. It's also human resources, it's HR, it's EBAs, it's financial. And sometimes the financial incentives go against the health application. So we need to be careful there as well. So that's what I would say in terms of the design. So you need to look at that design first. But to your point then, Josh, about what can you do? The first thing I would say to people is when you come off a night shift and you're trying to get as much sleep for the day next day, the first thing is the avoidance of alcohol. We see this a lot. People go, well, I've worked a really hard night shift, I deserve a beer. I'm not saying you don't deserve a beer, but do you really need a beer at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning? Alcohol is going to help you fall asleep, but it's really going to fragment and disrupt your sleep. The second thing is coffee. Because you've come off a night shift and it's early morning, you might associate the morning with coffee. We don't want the caffeine or alcohol input at this time. We want to try and get to bed as soon as possible. We want that bedroom like cool, dark, and inviting. We want to avoid as much natural light as possible on the way home after a night shift as well. So I would say avoid light at all costs. Do not consume caffeine, do not consume alcohol, and do not go to the gym. See this as well. People going, I'll just go to the gym and have a really good workout that'll tire me out. It's not good. These are all alerting strategies. So we want to use these all in reverse. No exercise, no caffeine, no alcohol, and no light. They're the 4 big things I would say to people. After that then, into the bedroom, cool, dark, and inviting. It is worked as a rotating shift worker, particularly in your industry, investing in good blockout blinds or a roller shutter outside where you can eliminate all sources of light. This is always recommended because we want to try and get as much sleep as we can that day before coming back, and sleeping during the day is always going to be difficult coming back to that circadian rhythm because we have an increase in body temperature, an increase in cortisol and stress levels. The other thing I'd say as well is that it's okay to have 2 sleep periods in between. A lot of shift workers may go to bed at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, wake up around 11 or 12, get kind of stressed about not getting enough sleep, might be hungry or need to get up and move around a bit. Have something to eat, move around a bit. Again, try to avoid light and stimulus, and then go back to bed maybe at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for that second dip in your circadian rhythm. So having those 2 sleep periods is fine as well.
Yeah, cool.
I've always tried to save after that first night shift, partner will say, why don't you go and have a lay down? And I'll say no, because I won't sleep tonight. So I try and get through the day without having that nap.
Well, I think it's really important. Are you talking about coming off your final night shift or in between night shifts? Because I was discussing in between night shifts.
Yeah, so that's in between. So after my first night shift, I'll come home.
Yeah.
And I've got to go back at 6 o'clock the following night. So I will try and not sleep because I'm, in my brain, I'm thinking, well, I've had too much sleep through the day. I won't sleep on my night. Then I'll be more fatigued the following day because I'm sort of trying to push through a 14-hour night shift awake.
Okay, so I want to get this example right before I answer this. Let's say you do Monday night, you do a night shift and you finish at 6 a.m. in the morning and you have to be back in at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. And
Correct.
Your thought process is I'm going to stay awake all day?
All Tuesday, yep, to go back to work Tuesday night.
I would not recommend that because then you could be awake potentially for 36 hours.
Yeah, right.
Because if you go on that Monday night shift, and let's say you got a really busy night, you got lots of jobs and you don't sleep, then you come home, you're trying to stay awake all day. You could have another busy night the next night as well. So potentially you could be 36 hours or more awake. That is lethal. I would not do that. In your job where it's hard to plan what's going to happen, you can't rely, unless you, I suppose, maybe people have got it dialed in at different depots or different stations where they know that there's going to be generally a Monday night 90% chance they won't get called out. That might be different. But for other people, I would say in a busy metro environment, you're rolling the dice there big time because 17 hours of wakefulness is the equivalent reaction time as being intoxicated to 0.05%. 24 hours awake is like being intoxicated to double the legal limit, 0.1. And not to mention that, apart from those acute safety issues, that is going to really impact your whole sort of leptin and ghrelin levels, which are appetite regulating hormones. It's really not going to be, it's not good for you really in the long term. I would say get sleep when you can, and when you come off night shift. If you're worried about building up too much sleep pressure or reducing too much sleep pressure, at least have a 4-hour sleep, Jess.
Okay.
At least go, right, I'm going to come home 7 to maybe 11 or 12. I get up at lunchtime, and then I get out and have some exercise, because I know with a good chance tonight I'll get 3 or 4 hours at the station. Then what you're doing is you're having 2 sleep periods. We call that biphasic sleeping. So there's monophasic, 1 sleep period. I go to bed at midnight and I get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, for example. Biphasic is like a toddler to have a nap in the afternoon. And polyphasic is what you see sometimes doctors doing in a hospital, lots of sleep periods around the clock, because they're just grabbing sleep whenever they can, or in military environments as well. So if you're worried about that, I would try and get at least 4 hours then, in case that's happening. Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah, but pushing through and staying up, I would not recommend it for your own health. It just wouldn't be recommended. Yeah.
So awesome advice there, Ian, on what to do in between night shifts and stuff. I'm just wondering if those same bits of advice, the dark room, cool temperature, avoiding alcohol, caffeine, exercise, stand as well for a standard night's sleep. So we've finished our rotation or our tour, and then we're in our 4 days off. Do they still stand over night time as well?
They do stand. So you're talking about here, Josh, transitioning from nights back onto days. You got 4 days off. You want to enjoy those 4 days as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Yeah, so we call this getting back, adapting back to the real world. So yes, I would nearly mimic the strategy I've just said to Jason there about sleeping for maybe 3 or 4 hours. Now, this is where people go astray. They go, I've just had 4 crazy nights, and then they end up sleeping till like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You want to kind of get up and get out by 11 a.m. at the latest. If you finish at 6, you're in bed at 7. And you want to then basically have this day as your adaptation day. This is not the day to go on the piss. This is not the day to go to the casino. This is not the day to pick up the kids in the car. This is the day for you to synchronize back in. And we see lots of people doing this. Oh, I'm going to go on a camping trip. Highly fatigued, pick up the kids, highly fatigued, going to the bar, drinking, going to the casino. You're going to make bad decisions. This is not a great day. You've just accumulated 4, 5, 6, whatever days it is, of sleep debt and sleep loss and circadian disruption. You need to get back on track as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Can we possibly dial in on a couple of those strategies that you said? I'm particularly interested in light and the effect that it has on us and our sleeping, and also caffeine as well.
Yeah, so let's look at light first, because this is probably the most dominant factor, and there's lots of work coming out of Flinders University in Adelaide at the moment. So Professor Sean Kane and Professor Andrew Phillips and a bunch of other people are doing some great work around this, and they're looking at the impact of light, not only natural light, but artificial light as well. Light is a really dominant factor with humans. So we have what's called an SCN, a suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's like basically, it's a fancy name for your body clock. It's about half the size of your small fingernail. It's a small group of cells that sits in the base of the hypothalamus in the brain, and this regulates everything in your body. So when people say my body clock is off, I'm out of sync, I'm out of whack, this is what's out of whack, because this sends signals throughout the body to respiratory, digestive system, circulatory system, and so on. Now, how this gets synchronized is from natural light through the eye that synchronizes this SCN and then synchronizes the entire body. So if you're working shift work, you're traveling across multiple time zones, you're working on odd hours, you're working underground in a mine where you don't get these signals, this can be difficult for people. So they often have what's called circadian disruption or circadian misalignment. This is why some people may have what's called shift work disorder, insomnia, jet lag, and so on from this. And so the biggest thing to synchronize this is light. Now, we've worked with a Formula One team for about 3 years doing this, because they're very similar to fly in, fly out in mining. They'll do a week in one city, jump on an airplane, go to another city in another location. So they've got travel fatigue, they've got jet lag, and then have high performance, high risk activity the next weekend. And so one of the biggest factors here we use is light, is the manipulation or the exposure to natural light. So it's really key for humans to do this. And so we can use light to help us on shift to stay alert, and then we can use it to adapt back to normal daylight hours as well. We also see other benefits with light, common mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, and so on. We see people who get more light during the day actually have better mental health outcomes as well. Better entrainment or synchronization of these circadian rhythms are good as well. So we often say that, like, for people in the morning, maybe try to, if you're going for a walk or getting your coffee, or even just sitting in the backyard getting some light, if you're working day shift, is very good for synchronizing this, and it's very helpful. It's also a good strategy when you go across multiple time zones to try and sync in with the local environment. Now, if you go to a casino, they use all this in the opposite way. They don't show you light, they don't show you clocks, they pump it full of oxygen. They want to make you feel like you're in that forbidden zone, which I was talking about, between 6 and 9 o'clock at night. So you're constantly feeling sort of like slightly alert constantly. So you're like, oh, this is really good. Whereas in the real world, we want to kind of live by the light and dark cycles as much as possible. So light is so important. And we see in big epidemiology studies or cross-sectional data with, like, hundreds of thousands of data points, that the people who don't get enough light exposure have poor outcomes across all elements of health. And so this has been published in some really high level journals over the last couple of years. Again, I'd really look to Sean Kay and Andrew Phillips' work around this, because they've been looking at this, and they've also been able to map out individual light sensitivity. So some people are more sensitive to light than others. So if you have to wear sunglasses all the time outside, even in winter, this might be an indication that, or a kind of a proxy for the fact that you might be very light sensitive. Or at nighttime, you don't like lots of, like, lights on in the room. You like low level lamps and so on. So yeah, light is key. It's the number one thing I think we should manipulate as shift workers.
On that, that was all surrounding natural light. Can we supplement that and manipulate that through, I guess, to help us with our shift work?
Yeah, you can. And so you want to use the opposite of that, obviously coming off shift. But then at nighttime, if you're working, like, whilst artificial light is not going to be as good as natural light, it does help as well. So having lots of artificial light will be very good. The challenge you might have in the fire department is that if people are trying to have a nap, you can't be blaring a light into their eye. So that's going to be the challenge. So again, if you are walking for a call out, you want to get those lights on as quickly as possible, get people moving and so on, to do that. And then when you get to that environment, I'm presuming, it's going to be obviously difficult depending on the job that you go to, about as much light as possible. But the more light, the better it's going to be for you in terms of an alerting strategy. But again, when you come back and you're trying to wind down, you want to then use the opposite. And again, you want to lower all those lights if you're trying to have a nap between the next job. And the other thing I'd say as well, even if you can't sleep between jobs, turning down the lights and just relaxing is good. You want to just relax the whole system and reduce that cortisol stress as much as possible. This can be very helpful. See a lot of people having this as well. Oh, I went to bed and couldn't have a nap. I just enjoyed the silence and the quiet for half an hour. This is very beneficial, like a kind of a deep rest type of thing. Yeah.
Would that be how that meditation process works? Because, with meditation, and experienced this firsthand only recently, that I didn't feel like I was in a sleep, but I felt like I was, altered.
In a daze. Were you taking any drugs at the same time, Jason? Or?
Negative.
No, okay. Look, the meditation thing is interesting because there's always different types of meditation. So, and it depends. Some people sometimes view meditation as like, a kind of a religious thing or whatever it might be, because it might come out of Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism and so on. But there's meditation in all sorts of religions. But I often say to people, meditation or this kind of quiet self-reflection is very good. Some people like hypnosis, whatever works for you. And I think you're right. For some people, it's just that deep, relaxed state. In Hinduism, there's one they call yoga nidra, which is like a dream yoga, so to fall asleep. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's there as well. I'm actually just writing a blog this morning on, I went to a concert last night by what they call a postmodern contemporary classicist music called Max Richter. He actually developed an 8-hour symphony, if you want to call it. Well, it's not really a symphony, but an 8-hour concert. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's called Sleep.
No.
But it's actually 8 hours of music. And he's done this concert live himself, 2 violinists, a celloist, or maybe 2 celloists, or cellists. Oh God, can't even speak. Anyway, and so they play this live and people actually sleep at the event.
Wow.
It's quite interesting. There's a documentary on it called Sleep. So Max Richter Sleep. If anybody Googles it on Spotify or YouTube, you'll find it. That's actually quite interesting. Now, I went to a different concert of his last night for only 2 hours, but like this is the sort of design to help people to sleep and going now those stages of sleep and these different frequencies as well. So my answer to this is like, whether it's meditation, whether it's sleep, whether it's music, hypnosis, whatever works for you, whatever calms you. Some people like listening to podcasts, other people like listening to the ABC News. Whatever works for you is completely normal. It's completely fine. There's no definitive science on what works. But back to your thing, Jason, about meditation, this state of relaxation, that has been shown numerous times in our lab to be very beneficial. You just want to find something that works for you, though, that syncs. You don't want to be getting irate like listening. So if someone's voice is like doing your head in, you don't want to be doing that. So like if I'm doing your head in now on the podcast, turn it off. Yeah. We actually, Jason, on our channel, we have a 10-minute meditation with an ex-Buddhist monk. His name is Alexis Santos. He teaches through the kind of Theravadan tradition, or the insight meditation tradition worldwide. He's very good. So he did a 10-minute one, and we have it on our website, on YouTube or Spotify. And people like that, they often listen to it. It's just allow people just to relax, so they can fall asleep. Yeah.
Nice.
Just one more quick one on light before we move on. Do the blue light blocking glasses work?
This is always a good one, because the challenge with electronic devices is that there's a little bit of what we call moral panic going on with electronic devices. Everybody wants to blame electronic devices for what's happening to their sleep. I think people need to take a bit of personal responsibility here. People said the same thing about radio in the 60s. Oh, kids are listening to the radio. They're not going to school. They're not reading. They're all idiots. Everybody now has a color TV. They're glued to that thing. When video games start becoming more popular in the 80s when I was young, oh, those kids are just playing the Commodore 16. Like, it's always going to be something, right? But it's how you interact and how you use it. The challenge with the blue light blocking glasses is that they're not going to really reduce cortisol. So when we look at electronic devices, it depends the activity you're doing. So you could be sitting up there doing, emails for work at like 10 o'clock at night. This is going to increase your cortisol. Or you could be sitting up watching an episode of Gogglebox and you're laughing and giggling and it's making you relax. So the interaction with the electronic device is not always the same. Some people like to scroll on Instagram and they laugh at funny cat videos. But the problem with all of these things is one is the activity. So what's the cortisol response for this? And two, it's generally replacing sleep time. This is what I often call the Game of Thrones effect. One more episode. Well, just see what happens. Well, guess what? There's a pause button on that thing now. Years ago, TV would stop at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, but now you can actually pause it and watch it tomorrow. But we have that option. And I think it's a lack of self-discipline here with people. It gets back to what I said to Jason at the start. It's about routine. Routine is boring, but it's effective. And so that's the challenge here as well. So I think what we're seeing in the data is more about replacing of sleep time and the cortisol effect as opposed to the electronic device itself. You could have that same effect by bringing a really good book to bed and going, oh, one more page. Or sitting up talking to somebody on the phone. So it's about your discipline with that. The blue blocking glasses aren't going to stop that. So
if you're wearing your glasses up until midnight scrolling, it's not going to help you, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. People just think this is like, it's been sold as this solution. The other thing as well is looking at the data on a larger scale. We have objective data, which is where we measure people's sleep with devices and medical stuff and in lab. And then we have self-reported or subjective stuff. All the subjective stuff says, yeah, electronic devices ruin my sleep and kids' sleep. But all the objective data says the opposite.
Interesting.
So it's a real disparity between the two. And I've seen many, many studies that have had high-level medical measurements done, and there's not really that much of an impact. There was a big study done last year in New Zealand with kids ranging from the age of 5 up to about 15 or 16. Thousands and thousands of hours of data, no effect. But what was impactful was when the kids brought the electronic device into the bedroom, then they were playing on the electronic device, replacing sleep time. But if they played on the electronic device, left it in the kitchen and went to bed, no impact to sleep. Yeah. So it's about discipline and routine.
That's a little hack that I do myself, actually. I make sure I just leave my phone. Doesn't come into the bedroom with me at all. Leave it in the kitchen, turn it off, whatever.
That's for me, like that's like the same. That's like blaming McDonald's like for obesity. You decide whether you go in there or not. This is the thing. You decide when and where you have it, and so you can't. I think there's there needs to be a bit more self-control with some people, not just for sleep, but for a few other things as well. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to take it.
Well, let's follow that track on that personal accountability and talk a little bit about caffeine consumption and how does caffeine affect us in regards to sleep.
So people often go like, oh, I take lots of caffeine because this is good. This will make me less sleepy. It's not going to reduce your sleep pressure, but it'll mask the deleterious or negative impacts of it. Now, when we talk about caffeine, it's really important to note the pharmacokinetics of caffeine, which basically is a fancy word for saying is how does this affect me and for how long? So generally, when we consume caffeine, it's going to take between 0 minutes to 1 hour to impact us to peak. So we get our peak sort of benefit from the caffeine. Then it could be 4 to 6 hours before that's out of us. That's called a half-life. So most humans will, different types of metabolizers, but this will happen for most people. That then leads into the conversation about the timing of caffeine, because if you're consuming caffeine at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning before you go home, this is now going to impact your sleep. So I generally say to most shift workers, if you've got issues sleeping during the day, you need to stop all caffeine consumption at midnight to make sure it's out of your system. On top of that as well, where we go wrong, I think mainly men, is understanding the sources of caffeine. Caffeine is not only in coffee, but it's in chocolate. It's in dark chocolate. It's also in these energy drinks, Mother, V, so on, all these type of things. And I have seen guys, shift workers go, I didn't know there was caffeine in it. I just thought it helped you stay awake, right? And the other one we see as well, particularly for those who like to go to the gym, is pre-workout. And they'll say, take 1 scoop of this. And because we're men, we're idiots, we'll put in 3 scoops. And that could be the equivalent to like 9 or 10 espresso shots. So all of these things play into our cumulative caffeine consumption. And then if you're having like coffee, dark chocolate, taking pre-workout, it's just caffeine upon caffeine upon caffeine. And that 4 to 6 hour window then is just constantly shifting forward. And it's going to impact your sleep. So it's very important to understand those pharmacokinetics of caffeine, so we know how it impacts our sleep before we go to bed.
So we've talked a lot about sleep and some of the disadvantages, I guess. What is the health, like lack of sleep? How does that affect us with our health? Is it going to be, if we're not sleeping for months and months and months, is it are we at high risk of getting cancers, or what's it doing to us, poor sleep?
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways to look at this. One is in the acute, or the safety aspect. So what's the short-term impact, and then what's the long-term impact of poor sleep? The first thing in the acute, the safety aspect, is obviously your own personal health and safety. If you're going to be operating at work or driving or anything where you have a high amount of sleep there, your reaction time is going to be impaired, your decision making and so on. I think that's been well shown over the years. What's probably harder to show is the impact on long-term health. It's harder to work out exactly what's causing what, because there is a lack of work on shift work studies, particularly outside of the lab, and longitudinal studies as well following people. So a lot of the data is coming from long-term, cross-sectional, big epidemiology type data sets. And it's sort of low in its measurement in terms of its efficacy, but it's powerful in terms of the number of people it has when you start joining studies together. So you may have seen that over the years that there's been, like, the World Health Organization has said the more permanent night shift you do, the higher the odds risk ratio for cancer, breast cancer in women and prostate in men. But what those studies don't take into account is the controls. So what are people doing? How is the roster being designed? So that's why I often say to people, like in organizations, you don't want to have permanent night shift. It's not actually better for you to have people always doing permanent nights. Then are we educating people? Are we doing podcasts like this? Are we giving people information? And shameless plug here, this is why we developed our book, Sleep Health, a guide for shift workers, because there's very little resource out there for shift workers. There's lots of stuff, like there's great books out there, like by Matt Walker and other people, about why we sleep, and there's other stuff out there. But very few of these areas actually touch on the practical elements for shift workers and what they can do. And so we need to be putting as many controls or elements in place to reduce that risk for us personally as well. So long term, yes, the more night shifts you do, the less sort of focus you have on your own diet, nutrition, and mental health. The more we see them with shift workers probably having higher alcohol consumption, use of stimulants, sedatives, poor mental health, poor relationships, these marriage breakdowns and so on. All these things are going to lead down, and then increase the risk of developing other metabolic issues such as type 2 diabetes, potentially then developing cancers and so on. But again, we're looking at big data set. So I couldn't say to you today, Jason, if you do 2 nights, 2 days, 4 off, twice a month for 10 years, you're going to die of a heart attack. We don't have that finite down to that.
Yeah.
So it's constantly looking at these two sides, these organizational factors, like I said before, with the companies and how they're designed, and then the individual factors. But I'd urge people to remember as well, if the work design hasn't been done correctly, you're going to be just swimming against the tide constantly as individuals. So it's very difficult for people to do that.
On that, have you had any experience certainly with firefighters, I guess, with the 24-hour shifts versus the shorter shifts, the 14 hours?
Yeah, I did a podcast recently in the US about this as well, and we've had some experience with this in other environments, and that's, again, it's going to come down to whether you can get a sleep opportunity or not, which is going to be hard. Some people think that just doing a 24-hour shift is better for you and staying awake, but again, we got to think about those impacts in terms of performance and so on, being awake for long periods of time. And then we also start thinking about, then, if we have people on for 24 hours, what is the risk about them getting to and from work? So we won't even just talk about the design of the shifts and roster. If we're looking at this, we'll look at things like travel and commute time as well. Because, and I'll just make up an example here. Let's say you work in Melbourne, but you live in Geelong. It's probably about an hour, right? Or Perth, and you're in Mandurah, or Brisbane to maybe the Gold Coast. So that on top of a 13, 14-hour day, it's very hard for you to come back and get 8 hours of sleep in that time that's left over to come back again. So you have to build all those factors, those sensitivities into it as well. So it becomes quite complex for some groups. I'm probably not really answering your question, but it's just, these are all the things that have to play into it, in terms of looking at shift work.
Yeah, a lot of contributing factors, obviously, with all of those
shifts. Just thinking on that, you mentioned before, Ian, that the 24 hours is the equivalent of, was it 0.1?
Yeah, 0.1, yeah. We discussed this in the book. If you bought the book, lads, and read, you wouldn't have had to talk to me today. You could have done this podcast on your own. You wouldn't even need me on here. You could have just regurgitated it out. It's only $10 on Kindle. Come on.
The order will be going in after this.
$5? Where the hell am I going to get $4 from?
What I'm interested to know is that 24 hours and that 0.1, obviously twice the legal limit. And in your consulting, like you said, you've done that organisational stuff, the individual stuff. What are some controls that organisations can put in to mitigate that? So I just think about us. We'll say our first night shift, we're up all day, mucking around, working around the house, whatever. We're not sleeping, and then we're going and we have a rubbish night for 14 hours. That's 24 hours we're awake at least.
Yeah.
And then we've got to drive home. So how do we mitigate that?
So the first thing I'd say to you, Josh, is that without pointing the finger at your employer, you should point the finger at yourself, because you should be getting sleep on that first day before you start. So there is strategies around that in preparation. We call it sleep optimization or sleep banking. You're going into this shift period. You should do something for at least 2 to 3 hours in that afternoon before you go in. In that dip before 1 to 4 in the afternoon, this is where I would say to you, this is where you need some at least quiet time, like Jason said, some meditation, some relaxation. And even if you don't sleep, you need that downtime to relax, right? So you want to try and de-stress. But generally, we see people do get a 20-minute, half an hour nap at this stage. This comes up in the mining industry. We do a lot of stuff in mining. So people fly in and then, they're kind of sitting around to do night shift at night. So, and people have the same challenges. So I would urge you to at least kind of go, right, by midday before I do night shift, I'm not doing anything else in the second half of the day. And I understand you want to spend time with family and friends. I'd be the very same, but you need to kind of separate out some time for yourself there before you start that. The second thing then is I point the finger back at the employer and say, 14-hour night shifts, you need to get rid of these. Because there's an assumption there that that's better for you, and it's not. It should be the other way around. And then I would say on the way home, there should be some contingencies in place from you and the employer about, if you are fatigued, how do you get home the next day? So is there the use of taxi vouchers? Is there emergency accommodation? What if you've had a really bad night and there's loads of overtime? What are the contingencies in place? And again, companies should do this, whether it's flight delays in mining, whether it's overtime or incident management issues going on, there should be something in place to make sure you get home safe the next day. I see this happening in other industries as well, oil and gas or controllers. They end up actually, the company will use like transit accommodation. So they might actually get, and I'll just make up an example here. So this is not something that happened, but let's say it's in Sydney and people are driving in from all areas. They might say, right, Jason, Josh, you guys had a crazy night last night. You went to 2 like RTAs. And so we've got these apartments. There's rooms there if you want to bed down for the days in between instead of driving home. And, here's some meal vouchers or just put in for some stuff. Because that will be far better than running that risk of you guys going back and sort of, getting distracted with home environments. The other thing as well on this as well, it's difficult and it's different between, this is where I said to some mining guys, you're actually quite lucky when you do a mining FIFO roster because you are on a site, you're on a camp, where all you have to do is your own washing, really. And in oil and gas, you don't even have to do that. All your meals are provided, you don't have to do any cleaning, and you have a full 12 hours off. And it's easy to do that. You just focus on sleep and recovery. But in these residential or cosmopolitan type environments, it's difficult because you get the distraction of family, kids coming and going, the neighbor could be building a house, someone's mowing a lawn, and it's always the same thing as well. Someone's going to start whippersnippering the minute you get into bed. So you have to kind of look at these strategies around setting up your home sleep environment about that. So having that room like a cave, dark, cool, inviting, the blinds, the earplugs, the block out blinds, the roller shutter, all these type of things. So it can be difficult for people to do this. And I don't want to gloss over this and say that like shift work is easy. It's not. It's difficult to manage, but you have to control as many things inside your, what the Stoics would say, or in psychology, internal locus of control. What's all the things I can do? And then the other things are outside my control, would be design of the rosters and so on. However, I did say this to a podcast in the US recently as well. It was an English guy. There's this podcast similar to yourself. I can't remember the name of it. I don't know if you know it.
We was that James Gearing?
Yes, yeah, that guy.
We had him a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, and I said to James as well, like, as a group, if you're not happy with those rosters, don't just shout about them. Get together and do a business case and talk about it in terms of like, how is this impacting our health? How is this impacting our safety? I'm sure, people will have information on turnover, like how is this affecting people? We might have lost 10 people in the last year because of this. How is this affecting our ability to respond to a job? And then what's this costing the business? Because once you start articulating that to leaders, you're doing the right things. Health, safety, people, your productivity or operational requirements and cost. That's really how I would frame this. And I say this to groups as well. You need to frame it in this way going forward, because just shouting and roaring about the roster, it's not going to get you anywhere. So think about what you can control in your own responsibility. And if you want to affect change with your leaders, think about making some sort of a business case or proposal across those sort of elements to make those changes.
Just thinking about that, I guess we're a bit of an anomaly too, in that we have the ability to sleep at night. Sorry, yep. Police, paramedics. But we also don't know our call rate either. We don't know if we're going to have a very busy shift or a not very busy shift. That's in the hands of higher powers than us. So I guess it's, from an organisational point of view, I imagine it would be hard to design rosters effectively because you don't know what the workload is like.
This is where I was coming back to what I was saying to Jason earlier on about that. It's very difficult and it'll depend on the depot. I'm sure you can extract data and it would be there. I would say using statistical methods, we could probably work out on average how many calls you get per night, per day in certain depots and so on. So the design might have to be bespoke for different depots, right? And this is where I think we miss a trick because we have a one size fits all. We've done this in utilities before with call outs, because you get one depot, constant, all night, call. A depot then 10 Ks from the CBD, one call a night, right? So why are they doing the same roster as these guys? These guys getting paid the same money as compared to these guys. Now that gets a bit complicated because then people are like, oh, well, I need to get paid more because I'm doing more jobs and blah, blah, blah. But you might have to have a different set of rules around the amount of night shifts that you can do in one depot due to the call volume versus another one. In the military, they would do this. If you had a special ops unit, they wouldn't be out doing like 12-hour missions every night in a row for 2 weeks. They might do 1 or 2 strategic missions and then they're down. Right. So you got to think about like that as well. You got to look at that kind of call rate as well. I think this is something that people don't do really well, because once you dig into that data, it gets a bit complex. But this is like what we call the workload or the workload balancing. They do this approach in factories as well, Josh. If one line of a factory is like making cars, let's say Toyota, they call it hijunka. It's a Japanese word for leveling the workload. You need to have everything kind of steadied out. So if one group is doing many jobs or too much work, maybe we take some off and give it to the other group. And that might be redefining your areas of responsibility where you go to call outs, depending on the depots. That could be potentially developing new stations in different areas, or reducing stations, or re-looking at your area of operations, your AO. And so this is where I think companies or organizations, whether it be firefighters, whether it be utilities or whatever it might be, or paramedics, need to take a step up and look at it in more of a strategic form and what's happening down the line. So but in lieu of that, I would say for anybody, never guarantee or bank on getting sleep that night. So if anything, do at least the strategy I said to Jason and get 4 or 5 hours, and then hopefully you get some sleep that night, but do not count work time as sleep time. That is a luxury, not a right, I think, in your environment, right? So let's be honest about it, because paramedics, you probably have a queue of paramedics like we do in other places trying to get into the fireys because they think it's just all, sleeping and lollipops and feet up. But you could be in other depots or stations where it's not like that. So, yeah. So view it as a luxury, not a right, I would say, for people doing shift work like that, because it is nice to have, but you can't always bank on it.
That's good advice, and I think we're probably all a little bit guilty of that sometimes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I told you, I have it too good.
We do.
Koala bears, protected.
You mentioned your book before. Is that? Can we talk a little bit more about that? Yeah. Who's it for, and what are we sort of going to get out of it?
So look, we wrote that book basically because of these conversations, Josh, and it was really like, we were somewhat kind of sick of people reading technical books or reading sleep science books or general stuff like this. And again, great books, but they were like, how does that apply to shift workers? Or they would hear stuff on a podcast and be like, but I do shift work. And I've seen shift workers doing the opposite of what they should be doing because they listen to some podcast and they're doing the complete opposite thing of what they should be doing, right? And so that's where we lack this nuance. We also found as well that a lot of the books were written for an ambulance just drove down the road. That was a bit weird, wasn't it? So there you go. There's synchronization there. I've never seen an ambulance go down that road ever, living here for 5 years, and there it goes. We also found as well that the shift work books, that were out there were always kind of aimed at a slightly more educated audience, or they were very technical and heavy and towards university level. So we were like, right, typical shift worker hasn't got time to do a lot of reading, wants to get cut to the chase, but would like to know where the information comes from. What's the groups and information? So that's how we designed the book. So we designed it for people with a reading age of 12 to 15, because we know we have a vast array of people in shift work. We designed it where it was nice and short, so it's like less than 150 pages. It's broken into sections: sleep science, circadian rhythms, sleep problems and disorders, travel, commute, managing sleep, and managing shift work. It's got over 200 scientific references as well. So if you're that way inclined and you want to go and question it, you can go to the references in the back. Throughout the book as well, it's got scientific insights. So we delve into specific studies across a range of industries, and they're like a paragraph. It's got lots of bullet points in terms of what to do, like adapting to night shift, coming off night shift, between night shifts, getting ready for your first night shift. All these questions you've asked me today, every single one are covered in this. It's also question based. So when you go to the table of contents, it's like, is permanent night shift better or worse? What is the best roster? What is the best start time? What is the best shift duration? All those things are unpacked in the book. And in addition to that, throughout the book, we have QR codes, which go back to our sites that we control in our content. So further blogs, seminars, podcasts. So you're probably in for another 100 to 2 hours of additional content off the back of the book as well. So we provide that book when we do our sleep, health and fatigue training, which we do for many companies. That's a 3.5 hour course. Then everybody gets a complimentary copy of the book, or you can buy the book online. We also have a sleep, health, fatigue course that goes for 1 hour online as well that people can purchase. So we try to make as many resources that are cost effective for people to access. So I think the book, like through us, is like $35 delivered. The course is like probably $80 or something. So it's not a big investment. And we wanted to make it at a price point where everybody could access it. So I'll be honest, if anybody's published a book before, I'll know you don't make money off a book unless you're like the Jordan Peterson publishing 2 or 3 million of them. But for us, it was like we really wanted to provide something to give this info out because we are passionate about this area and we want to make it available to everybody. The Kindle version is only like $10 or something. So if people want to get the Kindle, they can. And there's a ton of stuff free on sleepforperformance.com. Seminars, I think there's like 150 podcasts, nearly heaps of blogs. There's a load of stuff there. So if people don't want to buy the book, there's a ton of stuff up there that they can access for free.
Yeah, sweet. We'll definitely put a link in the show notes and that. And the book sounds fantastic in that it's simple, it's short, and there's further reading, I guess, if you want to go that way.
And the other thing, Josh, is what we made it really, like, we actually ended up paying probably an extra 20% for the cover. We made the cover like a high end, and the pages as well. It's nice and thin, but it's a more durable cover that's kind of gloss, because we know people that's going to go into like tool bags, work bags, the back of a locker, so they can just wipe it off and it looks clean, and it doesn't get, you get a kind of a cheap book and it kind of frays and pages come out. Not with this thing. It's designed to be like, I haven't got a copy at the moment because I'm packing on my office for a move, but it's like, it's really skinny like that, and so it just slides into a tool bag or into a pocket or even into the bin.
That's awesome.
Ian, you mentioned that earlier on with the meditation, you've got that 10-minute piece there. Where do we access that again?
That'll be on the podcast, Sleep for Performance, and Sleep, the number 4 Performance, or you can go to the Sleep for Performance on YouTube. Again, I can give you all these links later on if you wish. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. We'll chuck them all up. If you don't mind, I just want to switch focus and pick your brain on something a little bit different. You've done a lot of work with elite sports, high-end athletes.
Yeah.
What, I guess, what sort of improvements do you see when you work with these athletes? And naturally, if you're improving their sleep, how are they improving in what they do?
Yeah. So this area of sleep and performance in athletes is very, very new. It's really only taken off since about 2010. Before that, there was very little work. Not too dissimilar to what we've just spoken about. We'll look at organizational factors and individual factors. Organizational factors could be the timing and type of competition. So look at Super Rugby, for example. If you followed that over the last few years, that's changed a lot now. But pre-COVID, that was a domestic competition where people traveled to Argentina, South Africa, and New Zealand, arguably did more international travel than even the Wallabies. So it was ridiculous, right? A domestic competition. So there's those factors that you can't really control. Formula One's another one as well, like that. UFC is another one where fights may be on at 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning in the UK for the pay-per-view audience in America, or here in Perth, we had like the prelim card starting at 6 a.m. So there's factors like that we have to move around and sort of bend to. So that's the very same, like you guys would shift work. Then there's a whole set of strategy goes into adaptation for those events as well. How you train. Is it a multi-event, so like Major League Baseball where to play 180 games in 6 months, or is it a fight that we're building up to over a 6-month period? So every sport is going to be different. There's difference between team sports and individuals. There's difference then between males and females. There's different impacts then between contact and combat sports and no combat or contact sport. This is actually a big systematic review we're looking at the moment, and how that impacts on sleep. So all of these factors come into play. Individuals and the same as well. How big are you? How small are you? Caffeine consumption, all these factors that we've spoken about, timing of sleep, adaptation, and so on. What we see is that probably for athletes over 30, this becomes more important. Sleep is the base of the recovery pyramid. And I'd say this for shift workers as well. You get away with a lot of shit in your 20s, right? We all did it. 18 to 30, you're bulletproof. When I was in the military, you could stay out clubbing till like 3 o'clock in the morning, come in at 6:30, run a 10K, sleep 20 minutes at lunchtime, and you're back again. You can go to the next night. Now at the age of 47, I would be in a coffin. I would die. Someone would have to box me up. I would not be able to do it. I would just, you might as well just, pronounce me dead on the spot. There's no way I could do it. But so I think it really, where we see this being more important is as athletes get older, I see more of an impact in terms of what happens in terms of their ability to train and recover. So I don't know if we can really say it's perfect about performance, because there's so much differences between sports. But what we do see is better recovery and better longevity in the sport. And again, it's really hard to measure and go, if you do this, you will get this, like what I was saying to Jason about like cancer and so on. But we know that athletes who focus on sleep and nutrition and recovery, particularly over the age of 30, have longevity in their careers. So this is something we do see. So if you want longevity, this is good.
And that's probably the same for a shift worker, I imagine, too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And this comes back to what we were saying at the start. I enjoy doing all these activities more than going out and drinking and sort of carrying on. So for me, that's why I just don't bother anymore. And I take away all those things that are going to make me feel like shit, so I can do all the things that I really enjoy. And I just get more joy out of doing those things,
It's ironic that you say that, because we've had a number of guests say exactly the same thing, that they've given up alcohol for numerous reasons, but the benefits that they're feeling far outweigh what you get from drinking.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to come on here and be some sort of like evangelical person about the downsides of alcohol. I'm actually pro everything. I'm like, legalize everything and let people choose. I'm someone for free speech and free choice. Like, let people do whatever they want to do. I like less control in that respect. But for me, I took a break in 2012 when I was training for like a 100-mile race, the Leadville 100. And I just felt so good after 6 weeks. And then I had a few beers. My brother, he was living in Vancouver. And I just felt like shit the next day. And I went, what's the point? And I said, look, I'll just stay off for a while. And I just got better and better and better. And my sleep improved, my clarity of thought, any sort of grayness or depression around it really just, was reduced. And then it turned out, actually, about 3 years ago, I got diagnosed with the start of Crohn's disease, right? And so the gastroenterologist said to me, it's just a good job you didn't drink or smoke over the years, because if you did, this would have really impacted you. And I said, that's probably why I stopped drinking, because I felt like shit. I had a sore stomach. I'd be bent over in pain for a few days after it. And so that it's all that kind of protection mechanism. Again, what's inside my control. Now, again, I don't want to come across as evangelical. If you want to drink 10 beers a night, more power to you, off what you want to do, and smoke 10 joints, great. It's just not for me. That's all. It's no sort of crusade on my behalf.
Just a little segue on that. I don't think we've touched on it yet. If you do have 10 beers a night, how is that going to affect our sleep?
Well, it's really interesting that you said that, because today I just emailed one of my colleagues, Carissa Gardner, and Carissa is I think she's at Australian Catholic University. And she's either finished her PhD or finishing off, and she just published a big review, a clinical review on the effect of alcohol and subsequent sleep in healthy adults, a systematic review and meta-analysis. And this was published in Sleep Medicine Reviews. Carissa's published a really good review before on caffeine. And basically what Carissa has found, and she does like little infograph on it too, that so basically when you consume alcohol, and we knew this already, it helps you fall asleep quicker, no doubt about that, but then it disrupts your sleep. So it takes you longer to get into REM periods of sleep. Then you have less REM sleep, and you also you go into stage 3 sleep as well. But like, it's just fragmentation across the board. So there's just no real benefits of doing it. So yeah, delays onset of REM, all these things that I've spoken about. So what we do know is that, and I'll have to read this paper in more in depth because I just scanned it this morning, and this was all within 3 hours of bedtime, by the way. So what I would say to people, if you want to have a beer, maybe have it around dinner time, have one or two, and then maybe switch over. What I have noticed in a paramedic group, lots of people go into 0 alcohol beers. Right. And we have seen an explosion of this in the last few years in Australia, where it was always pretty big in Europe. But now we have better sort of, beers coming in where people are like, oh, that's actually pretty good. And what I've noticed talking to people individually is that they actually, even themselves, said it was just pure habit.
Yeah.
So if I replaced that with just like a bottle of Heineken Zero at the end of the day, I just felt like it was this kind of, this de-stress. I sit down with a beer, have a shower, sit down, go, 10 minutes on my own, sitting in the yard, whatever it is, or looking out the window. And I get it. Because I have one Heineken Zero every night, and I love it. It's like a ritual for me. A nice cold beer. I really enjoy the taste of beer. I just don't want the negative effects of it for me. So I think what we're seeing a lot of that happening in shift workers as well. Or another guy was telling me a few weeks ago what he does. He'll have one or two proper beers. Then he'll just switch to non-alcoholic beers, and no one knows the difference. So he's left alone. Yeah, so there's those type of things as well. So overall, Josh, really, there's no benefit to your sleep from it. It'll help you fall asleep quicker, but it's going to disrupt the back end of your sleep in terms of duration and quality as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's an easy trap to get caught in, because you do feel like it does make you go to sleep easier, quicker.
Yeah, and look, the group that you're in, like shift workers, more prone to it as well. When I was in the military, I saw lots of people using it. Lots of caffeine, alcohol, stimulants, and sedatives in those type of environments. It's definitely a problem.
Yeah, definitely is.
Oh, too good. One other random question. You mentioned a number of times this dip in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I've heard before that, that dip, when that happens, if you take notice of it, roughly 6 hours from that point in time is when you should be going to bed. Is there any science behind that? So if you have that dip at, say, 3 p.m., then you should aim to be going to bed at, say, 9? Or
I haven't heard that per se like that, but it probably would line up with the general circadian biology, that where you would start seeing sleepiness then get sort of high around that time. I haven't looked at it in terms of a 6-hour rule, but it probably wouldn't be too far off. Yeah,
like a general rule of thumb.
It probably wouldn't be too far off. But again, coming back to Jason's point at the start, don't get so obsessed with it. Don't get sort of like, oh God, I should be feeling sleepy around this time. What's wrong with me? We're not a machine as well. This is the problem. We're biological diurnal animals, which means we live by light and dark cycles. So I would say to people, when you feel that wave of sleepiness, that's when you should start going to bed, right? So you don't want to be kind of pushing through and staying up or watching one more episode or doing more things or just going, because what happens then is people fall asleep on the couch, then they wake up, then they have what's called that sleep inertia, they're feeling groggy, then they'll go up and brush their teeth. And when you brush your teeth, what are you going to do? Put on a big light, you're stimulating, you're alerting yourself, then you get into bed and go, oh God, I can't sleep now. So we see this a lot as well with people falling asleep on the couch. So when you get that first wave, just kind of go to bed. But the 6-hour rule, I haven't heard that, but I don't think it's too far off. Yeah.
What about the difference between cold shower, hot shower before bed? Is there any benefits for better sleep, either one?
Look, the problem with this type of research I find as well is that it depends on the activity before bed, and I don't think the research has really shown this. People said a hot shower helps before bed. A lot of that research comes out of the US. If you're having a hot shower before bed in the US or somewhere like Ireland, where I'm from, that's great. Do that here, and your temperature's going to be through the roof when it's 40 degrees, right? So I'm not getting into a hot shower in a 40-degree day. If anything, I'm getting into a cool shower. It relaxes me and nervous system as well. From the cold water research that's been done, no impact on sleep after cold water immersion or cold water showers. Zero.
Okay.
I've seen no effect. If people can find a paper that says the difference, happy to have a look at it, but I haven't seen anything. A lot of that work came out of AIS and some stuff came out of University of Western Australia. I haven't seen any impact on it as well. The hot shower stuff or the hot bath, a lot of that is self-reported as well. So I think whatever works for you. Look, I'm sure if you've been at a crazy incident all night as a firefighter and you've been wearing those like level 2 sort of firefighting equipment, you're being in a BA, the last thing you want to do is get into a hot shower. You probably want some sort of tepid or cool shower. And, dare I say, lie down in your underwear with the aircon on, the fan on for 10 minutes and just chill. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into a hot shower for the sake of improving my sleep. That would make me absolutely insane. So yeah.
So just to be clear, no science to back hot, cold, either way before bed.
Well, I think that there is science to back that the stuff before bed, but I think they haven't looked at in terms of shift workers or environmental factors or people working underground or people in firefighters. They've been done in general population, a lot of these things. The cold water stuff has been done in athletes, but again, it had no negative impact before sleep. So I think whatever works for you, really, whatever you like to do. But you're not gonna cheat the system here by having a hot shower or a cold shower and improving your sleep quality or quantity in the environments that we're talking about. And the caveat here is shift workers that we're talking about today, and particularly on emergency services. A lot of this stuff has been done in laboratories and self-reported. Yeah.
So I guess key takeaway then, if there's nothing to, I guess, definitive to underpin this stuff, it's do those, how you'd call it, try things yourself, do those little experiments, see what works.
Yeah.
What sort of routines and rituals and tools and stuff work to help each individual.
Yeah. And if it's stressing you out by having a hot shower, like if someone says to you, oh, the best thing to do is like listen to this meditation, have a hot shower. The hot shower is making you irate and pissed off, or a hot bath. And then you're listening to a meditation or hypnosis that's annoying you. Don't do it. What you don't want to do is increase stress before bed. On this point as well, when you come off night shift, it's not a good time to be having those discussions at home with your partner. Don't be sitting there going through mortgage repayments or financial spreadsheets. You need to go home and get into bed. That's not the time for discussion. That can wait till later on. What you don't want to do is spike your cortisol in any shape, way, or form. And that's the other thing with the book as well, I'd say to people, is give it to your partner to read as well. Or point out certain paragraphs. See, I told you, this is what you should be doing. So you can use that as your sort of defense against the dark arts, right? So you can get yourself a bit of space there as well, because sometimes people who haven't worked shift work, the partners, male or female, will just kind of think that, it's all cruisy, or there's a misconception that you just sleep all night if you're a firey or you're working in a hospital because they've seen something on a TV show. See this a lot in mining as well. People just think like they're in some sort of resort, but then when the families get a chance to visit the mine, you can see the shock on their faces when they go, oh, you actually stay here for 2 weeks. It's not actually that, it's not a holiday.
Yeah, good point. Circling back to your book, does that cover both those individual aspects and then also that organizational design aspect as well?
Yeah, there's many factors along that. Now, the book doesn't break it out and go, this is organizational, this is individual, but there's lots of factors in there around design and shift work for so on, and developing programs on sleep disorders, sleep problems. So there's lots of stuff in there for organizational leaders. I would say it's just as important that they read this book as it would be for people doing shift work. And also as well, if you're a leader and you don't do shift work, but you have people who are doing shift work, then this is a must for you, because you need to understand what's affecting your team.
Have you had any organisations that have changed their ways because of information from the book or by talking to you?
Yeah, well, so we've been working with companies over the last 8 years, and we've affected a lot of change in companies. And it's interesting because sometimes we go in and the guys want to lynch us because it may impact their pay, or they've got their lives set up around it as well. And it's really important that we do consult with people. And I know not everybody's going to like everything, but we have to try to reduce risk as reasonably practical as possible in a business, right? And I understand that it can be impactful. However, we've also seen people come back 2-3 years later and go, oh man, when you come in here and you said we were going to change the flight times and the shift start times, I thought it was all bullshit. But in actual fact, that 1 hour difference made a huge impact to me. Now I can go to the gym. Or, one guy was like, oh, he got diagnosed with a sleep problem, lost 35 kilos and got rid of the sleep problem. So there is some success stories out there. There's plenty of them. And also for companies, we can reduce risk significantly out of business and reduce their liability, which then transfers into how people feel and how they act as well. So yeah, across the board, we've seen lots of positive benefits. Look, I'm sure there'll be people out there that says they didn't feel any change or whatever it might be, and it was maybe an administrative exercise to reduce risk, but at least we have to reduce those elements of risk as well. It's probably worth noting as well that this year there will be a new guide for managing fatigue coming out for Safe Work Australia that was developed last year, and it's had, I think, over 100 submissions in the consultation phase, and that's supposed to come out sometime in the first half of 2025, and that covers lots of these things around organizational design, and it's very risk-based about assessing risk and controlling risks, and so that will cover some of these topics that we've spoken about today. We are potentially looking at some other books to bring out as well that are more in this same vein as practical guides, because I think that's what we need, is more of these practical guides. So potentially 2 other books we've been discussing making is one around sleep and athletic performance, and not just for elite athletes, but I'm sure, Josh, you see this as well in firefighters, people who they want to keep fit and healthy, do a triathlon on the weekend or whatever it might be. So how can we provide some information around that? And then the other one is back to what we were just talking about there, is how do you design a fatigue risk management system that kind of balances all these things as well? So again, it's not about providing the one size fits all, but it's saying to people, these are the factors and these are the steps you must go through to consider, because every organization is going to be slightly different. Yeah. So we have a paper that we got published a few years ago about fatigue risk management diagnostics, and we use that system to basically assess companies and work with them. There's 14 elements on that, ranging from educating team members to looking at healthy lifestyles, which includes caffeine and alcohol, the design of the work, the shifts and rosters, traveling commute, consultation with team members, sleeping environment, sleep disorders, sleep problems, fatigue procedures, adhering to legislation, regulation, and so on. So it's that kind of transcendent system that works across any country, and that's what we have to look at.
How much weight in that system is placed on education for the individuals? So, and the reason I ask that is because, that's a big reason why we're doing this, is to provide, experts like yourself and advice, guidance, and education in these things that we can change. How much weight is that in that system?
So we don't weight them in terms of you need to do 90% of the education and 10% of this. They're all sort of equally weighted in terms of their importance, and one would be applicable maybe more than another in a business, or some may not be applicable. However, the education piece is interesting because we often talk about the hierarchy of controls in health and safety: elimination, substitution engineering, admin, and PPE. And people will be like, yeah, but education is just an admin control. Yeah, on paper it is. But we all know that education can actually eliminate poor behaviors. Hence why you're doing the podcast, because you want to educate people to make the right choices. And that's why I don't like using the word training, even though I use it every now and then, and I shouldn't use it, because it's not about training people to follow 5 steps. It's about education. Here's the decisions and the trade-offs you can make depending on what's happening. So I think education can be so transformative, not just in this area, but in many other areas, to allow people to make those decisions, to make those improvements going forward. Because if I'm sure there might be a few things you picked up today that you go, I'm not going to do that anymore. So you're going to eliminate that behavior, which then kind of has that carry-on effect down through your action going forward. So yeah, these can be very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So I think we might wrap that up, being conscious of time today. Before we do, though, can we just quickly run over how we might access your stuff once more? Your book, the podcast, and yourself or your company?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways you can get a hold of us. We are Melius, Melius Consulting. So on that website, you can access our training, you can buy the book, you can get links out to the Kindle and so on. So that's Melius Consulting. It's very important. We put in consulting.com.au. And then we also have a kind of a sister website called Sleep for the number 4 performance.com.au. But look, if you bang my name into Google, you'll see lots of talks and podcasts I've done up there as well. So it'd be easy to find me if you put my name in and get a hold of me. And the most social media I'm active on is probably LinkedIn. I don't really do Facebook, and I put a little bit of stuff on Instagram, more personal stuff, but LinkedIn is the area that you'll find me from a business perspective. And I'm always happy to talk to companies about, running programs or improvements. We probably have a few different things that we do. There's a consulting stream where we help people design stuff like we've been talking about. There's a shifts and rosters stream where we go more in depth using modeling and some other exposure tools. And then we always have education. And then we have another one where we do risk assessments. And then we have another one where we do research activity. So we look at actually sleep and sleep problems in the field, where we can actually quantify what's happening. And all those things are interlinked, obviously, within our suite of tools, but they're the kind of main things that we offer to clients. And then for individuals, there's the book, their online course, if you can't come to one, or your company doesn't run one. And then there's obviously all the podcast and the free stuff up there as well, like yourselves, trying to put out as much information as possible.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Ian Dunican. I think I certainly took a lot out of it.
Yeah, most definitely.
And
it's one of those things that always around the mess room table, everyone's calculating sleep and how'd you sleep last night, and so it's going to be really beneficial.
Yep. Well, now you're officially educated, lads. You can go and spread the good word. No more bro science. You can go, I heard it right from the source.
And we will read the book.
Yeah. Order the book, leave it on the mess room table.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nah, awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Good on you, Ian. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
All right.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, Please show your support by subscribing, liking and rating the podcast on your listening and social media platforms. We are always looking to improve what we do. If you have feedback, suggestions for further guests, topics, or would like to be a guest yourself, please contact us via Instagram.